Hello, math fans. I'm going to continue talking about baseball batting averages. For those of you that are math fans and not so much baseball fans, you can skip this one. But for the rest of you, I would like to talk about the history of batting averages a little bit, just because I've been able to pull it up. This picture you can see on the right is every batting average, year-end batting average that's ever happened in Major League Baseball, going back to the 1800s, but only including people that have batted over 500 at-bats in a season. That does limit it to pretty much everyday players. There's even everyday players, nowadays that have may only get 400 at-bats. So 500 bats kind of restricts it to the real deal, somebody who's full-time Major League Baseball player. Okay, so you see it looks kind of like a bell curve. The highest ones are way over here, 440, and I've been pouring kind of through this data. The lowest ever is 189. I thought it was rude for me to list. So that means that person had to get 500 at bats and bat 189. Now, I know people have batted with lower batting averages than that. I'm a Mariners fan. But they didn't get to 500 at bats. So those are kind of the extremes. The most common ones, you can see a few here, like 271. And I did this, so I don't know if I have it ready for the video, but of the people that got 500 at bats, the median is in the 270s, I believe. There's a big bump here at whatever that was, if I can click on it, 300. So a lot of students, a lot of a lot of players batted exactly 200. But there's some interesting things I just want us to observe, and I really have never looked at this data until today. Thank you to my brother for pointing me out. So there's some little things like 298 hasn't happened that much, kind of unusual compared to the ones around it. You would think things would be a little more evenly spread out, considering we're looking at 150 years of data. But there's these little gaps. 248 doesn't happen very much, but 250 happens a lot. Why would that be? Over on this side, there's some interesting little gaps that are happening. This little bump here is 234, which is the one that kind of got me thinking about this. So there's kind of an unusual thing about particular numbers. Now, the overall scheme is kind of what you'd expect, except for these giant bumps here, like at 250, with 249 being really low next to it. I can explain that mathematically. And so that's really what got me started on this. But before I do that, I thought I would just look at this. So these are the top ones. I don't know these names. I don't know Hugh Duffy. I'd never heard of that actually till I was doing this, which tells you I'm not the best person here. Tip O'Neill. So a lot of these are from further back. More recently here, Rogers Hornsby is one that I recognize here. As a name I've at least heard. George Sisler, I guess I've heard that name before. Definitely heard Ty Cobb. And he's on here a bunch. Pretty darn good. Rogers Hornsby. So those are all the kind of the 1920s. Here's the 1930s. Bill Terry. So again, I wish I knew my history better. This is where I'm not a good person for this and need your questions. So that's that extreme end of what is possible. And we're also just laying a baseline for someone who maybe doesn't know as much of this. Okay, so that's the historical piece. I'm going to show you a couple more here. Just a moment. Get rid of that. Okay. So interestingly, as I was going through, when I was first tabulating this, before my brother showed me this data, how to more easily get it, I noticed the first time I got 2 was at 382. And I just thought that was interesting, so I pulled it up, and it's Joe Jackson and Ty Cobb, which sort of makes me laugh for those people that are fans of the movie Field of Dreams, which everyone should be. But I remember Joe Jackson says when all the players are coming in, Ty Cobb has to come, but We couldn't stand him in life, so we told him to shove it. So that's the Field of Dreams quote. Um, Anyways, they both were darn good hitters. Joe Jackson appears in the stats quite a bit throughout this. Another interesting one, the first number that comes up that no one else has hit is 375. So I was surprised that 375 is the first high average that only one person ever has gotten. And that's this Zach Wheat, 1924. So I just thought that was surprising. This 375 is right over here. The first unique one of these after this mass of them. And then because I'm a Mariners fan, we better find the first Mariner in there. And so we'll talk about that here. So the first Mariner is Ichiro. Ichiro has many high averages, but he batted 372. So he's as far as we can get over here, us Mariners fans. He's one of the 9 players that batted 372. He did it in 2004. He had several other times he was above 350. And I'll pull that up when I talk about the Mariners. Interesting people who are in his club is Nomar Garciaparra, Tony Gwynn. There's that Bill Terry again that we saw in a previous part. Some of those other names I don't know because they go further back. Todd Helton. Okay. So I thought that was a little bit of interesting history. And we're starting to see there are these kind of unusual gaps. I will bring this is this visual I showed. Check out my video on fairy sequences. The reason I made that video was for this. And as the days go by and I get closer to the next quarter, I'm worried I won't get to this. So that's why I'm making it here late tonight. These are all, I'm about to show you the fractions between 0 and 1. Now we're focusing pretty much on the fractions between 0 and 0.5 because no one's going to bat over 500. So I've already shown this visual in those other videos. So what I'm going to do is show you what happens if you only allow denominators, just the first few denominators. So there's if you allow a half is right in the middle, and then the thirds, a third and 2/3. So currently I have all the fractions you can get with denominators 2 and 3. And they're not evenly spread as you might expect because we're not spreading them out like you would on a ruler with a half and a fourth and an eighth. We're using a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. These little green lines that I'm drawing, this is my own little thing. And then later, if you watch the other video I explained, I finally realized, oh yeah, this is something I know. But I was like, I'm going to do a little line if it occurs twice. And I was very pleased with the visual I got. So I just am trying to get as much out of it. 1 is kind of an anomaly because it appears all the time, but a half is going to appear a lot. So it's already appeared here when I get to 4. Okay, so let's keep going. So I'm going to keep throwing these fractions in. So you can see some are occurring more than once. And I would like you just to look at where the gaps are. And then in a future video, I will explain why those gaps are there. And then we're going to compare it with what we're seeing with the baseball stats. It's not a perfect fit. I'm not claiming to have solved anything. It's interesting how these things overlap. And when you're doing baseball, you're really using small denominators. It's very rare for somebody to have over 550 at bats. Ichiro was an especially unusual case. I mean, it's amazing that Ichiro had in this table as I was looking at it. He had 704 at bats and he had 762 plate appearances. Like every time he came to the plate, almost it wasn't at bat. That is unusual. That was a complaint of him at the time, but you can't complain about his success because people were like, he should walk more. We didn't want that. Whatever he did was great. Okay, so let's keep watching and let's see those gaps as they appear. So what you're going to start to see, and I want you to be thinking questions about this because I'm not going to do that video, but you can see there's a big gap around 0.5. There's also this big gap around a third, and there's other little gaps based off of where those first few numbers were. But I think the visual is pretty stunning. It's amazing. It's kind of has some sort of pattern, but it's kind of unusual. Okay. Anyway, some of those key spots that you're going to be seeing in there are near where these little things are that make it less likely that fraction would happen. Okay. Maybe I'll leave it for a separate video, but I do have the Mariners stats here. This is every Mariners batting average. Now, this includes everybody, not just the over 500. So this is every Mariners batting average ever. So there's that on the far right. You can see Ichiro's 372. On the far left, you can see a 141. I think I limited to people that had at least 100 at-bats because I was trying to get more data. Here you can see the Mariners don't have some batting averages. Like, they've never had a 296. And that's really not one of my numbers. They've never had a 313. They've never had a 318. So it's harder with just one team to see some of these things, but there are these unusual, like 375 is gigantic, but 374 is really small. And so those tend to be those same numbers I'm talking about. And I'll talk about how it's even more pronounced earlier in the season when the denominators are small. We have a lot of people that batted 196. Our average is about 250, which is not really that good compared to historical data, but trying not to be negative. All right, let's finish with that. I think I'll talk a little more about the Mariners in a subsequent video, and then I'll actually go into the data, but this may take a couple days. If this is interesting to you, let me know. The Mariners data is pretty dang interesting to look into, so I just wanted to kind of precursor it before and hope that somebody actually is watching and enjoying what I'm doing. All right, thanks.